Okay, today we're looking at Module 4, Lesson 29. This is the last lesson before our quiz on Tuesday. Tomorrow you'll get the review packet. Monday we'll go over the review packet. Tuesday is your quiz. Today's lesson is similar to... Thank you. Today's lesson is similar to yesterday's lesson in the sense that we're going to be solving some puzzles. Yay. We think of it as puzzles, it might be a little less intimidating than word problems. Okay? We are going to use tape diagrams and algebraic equations to solve them. So they're kind of the same, but not. All right, so let's take a look at the first word problem. Again, just read it through, get your information, and then we will go back and deconstruct it and pull out the information that we need. Everybody should be on page 135 with the date on top of the page. Okay, so example 1. The school librarian, Mr. Marker, knows the library has 1,400 books, but wants to reorganize how the books are displayed on the shelves. Mr. Marker needs to know how many fiction, nonfiction, and resource books are in the library. He knows that the library has 4 times as many fiction as resource books, and he knows that he has half as many nonfiction books as fiction books. If these 3 are the only types of books in the library, how many of each type of book are in the library? So we're going to start by drawing a tape diagram to represent the total number of books in the library. Which do you think we should start with? Should we start with resource, fiction, or nonfiction? I found it later in the day yesterday, but then I lost it again, but now I found it again. What do you think would be easier to start with? Resource, fiction, or nonfiction? What are the others? 2 out of the 3 are based on one of them. Fiction. Well, if it's 4 times as many fiction as resource, what do I need to know first? I need to know the resource first. All right, so let's draw a tape diagram for resource. Right here in red is a quote from the problem. He knows that the library has 4 times as many fiction as resource. So let's use one box in our tape diagram as resource books. Fiction is 4 times as many. God bless. Allergy season's here. Come on, here we go. Those of you watching at home, I apologize. I tried, and I just locked that. Why is that moving? That ghost. All right, so fiction is 4 times as many resource. So what variable do you think we should use? Should we go with the R for the resource? Would the resource help us write fiction? Or should I go with the F for the fiction? Would that help us? What do you think would be easier looking at our 2 tape diagrams? R. Yeah, let's use R for resource. So what's the relationship between resource and fiction algebraically? So if R equals resource, how could I write the number of fiction books? If each one of these is an R, how could I write my fiction? Yep, exactly. So 4 times resource equals fiction. So now let's figure out the nonfiction. The problem tells us half as many nonfiction as fiction. So let's look at our picture for fiction, and we need half as many for nonfiction. So what am I going to draw? Now I'll draw 2 of them. And that's my nonfiction. So how could I write that algebraically?
No.
Thank you, excuse me.
2r equals
Yep. So our nonfiction equals 2r. 1. So moving right along, let's combine them so we can see one big visualization of the books in the library. What is the total quantity of books in the library? 1,400. We remember from our tape diagrams that we have R for our resource books, 4R for our fiction books, and 2R for our nonfiction books. Since we're writing the total quantity for R, we just have one big box that's the same size as 4 of the R's. Since I'm writing 2R, I'm drawing a box the size of the 2 R's. So what equation can I write based on what I see there? I have 2 bars that equal each other. How could I write that as an algebraic equation? What equals what? I want to try it. Take a chance. What do you see here? What's one side of the equal sign? 1,400. What do we know equals 1,400? I have an R plus a 4R plus a 2R. Okay? So that's what I see here in the picture. On one side of is equal is 1,400. The other thing I see is an R plus a 4R plus a 2R. Now, if I want to find the value of R, I can solve it algebraically. So what would be my first step, Michael?
You would do the 4r, the r plus 4r plus 2r equals 400, and then the regular r just equals 1r, so you would add them all together, and that equals 7.
Perfect. I have 7 R's that equal 1,400. I have 1 R here, plus 4 here is 5, plus 2 R's there is 7. So I have a total of 7 R's. So now what's my next step to solve that algebraically?
Then you would divide it by 7.
Both sides I divide by the inverse operation. So both sides I divide by 7. So R equals 200 books. So now that I know R equals 200, I could find out how many of each one I have. So R is 200, and that's the number of resource books. So fiction was what? 4R. So 4 times 200. So my fiction is 800 books. My nonfiction books equaled 2R. So my nonfiction is 2 times 200. So nonfiction equals 400 books. Now that we know how many of each book are in the library, there's actually another way that we can go about solving this. So now we're going to try a different model. Okay? So now it's asking you on your notes to draw a table. So draw this table. It's on the top of page 137. It's the second thing. It says set up a table. So if you set up a table, we have our fiction, our nonfiction, our resource, and our total. We know from our tape diagrams that our fiction books was 4R, our nonfiction books was 2R, our resource books were R, for a total of 7R. That was the information that we got from the word problem when we drew our tape diagram. But now instead of solving it algebraically, we could use this table. Remember way back when in ratios you were doing scaling up? We can use that to help us. So if R equaled 1, so I would have 4 fiction books, I would have 2 nonfiction books, 1 resource book, 7 books total. So that's my ratio. 4 fiction to 2 nonfiction to 1 resource for a total of 7 books. So that's my ratio of books. But I also know, given in the equation, that I don't have 7 books in the library. How many books are in the library? So I have to figure out how to scale up from 7 to 1,400. So what do you want our first step to be? 7, we'll scale it up to what? Want to scale it up to 700, or we could scale it up to 14? What do you want to do? All right, so let's scale it up to 700. So we'll multiply. If I multiply that by 100, what do I have to do all the way across? Right, so 100, 200, 400. But now I'm still not where I need to be. How am I going to scale up from 700 to 1,400? Yeah, so I have to do everything else times 2. Does 800 plus 400 plus 200 equal 1,400?
Yes.
Yes. So that works. And we did forget to come back here if we wanted to check. If my resource books was 200, my fiction books were 800, my nonfiction books were 400. If I add them all up, it does equal 1,400, which is my total number of books. So we could have checked that as well. All right, so you have 2 methods. Both start with the tape diagram. We use our tape diagram and we solve algebraically. Or you could use your tape diagram and set up a table and scale up to where you have to be. Now for your homework tonight, you're only going to do number 1 and number 2. So when you're solving these, you can set up a table, but you have to figure out the ratio that goes in the first row. So if you're going, you can draw your tape diagrams to help you set up your table, or you could solve it algebraically. It's really up to you which method you want to use, okay? But it is asking you for 1B to support it with equations. So you're going to make a table for A, and then the equations for B. If you want to draw the tape diagrams to help you figure out how to set it up, you can. Okay? We will go over these in great length tomorrow, and then like I said, you'll get your study guide tomorrow as well.